Greetings and welcome to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Institute of Food and Agriculture's Civil Rights Training webinar series for grantees. Today we will be discussing public notification and outreach. My name is Jessica Creighton. I am the Senior Equal Opportunity Specialist with USDA NIFA. In accordance with federal civil rights law and U.S. Department of Agriculture civil rights regulations and policies, USDA, its mission areas, agencies, staff offices, employees, and institutions participating in or administering USDA programs are prohibited from discriminating based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender identity, including gender expression, sexual orientation, disability, age, marital status, family parental status, income derived from a public assistance program, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity in any program or activity conducted or funded by USDA. Not all bases apply to all programs. Remedies and complaint filing deadlines vary by program or incident. Program information may be made available in languages other than English. Persons with disabilities who require alternative means of communication to obtain program information, for example, Braille, large should contact the responsible mission area, agency, or staff office, the USDA Target Center at 202-720-2600, voice and TTY, or the Federal Relay Service at 1-800-877-8339. To file a program discrimination complaint, a complainant should complete a Form 83027 USDA Program Discrimination Complaint Form, which can be obtained online at the following address from any USDA office by calling 1-866-632-9992 or by writing a letter addressed to USDA. The letter must contain the complainant's name, address, telephone number, and a written description of the alleged discriminatory action in sufficient detail to inform the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights about the violation. The completed form or letter must be submitted to USDA by mail at the following postal mailing address, by fax at 1-833-256-1665 or 202-690-7442, or by email at the following email address. USDA is an equal opportunity provider, employer, and lender. The objective of today's presentation is to explain equal opportunity notification requirements and explore outreach activities as a component of civil rights compliance in NIFA-funded programs and activities. We want all of our grantees to be implementing civil rights practices and procedures throughout the development, implementation, and evaluation of their programs and activities, and not just in response to a civil rights compliance review. However, all of our civil rights topics do have corresponding civil rights compliance review areas, and what we will be discussing today is reviewed during our civil rights compliance review under Review Area 7. So first we'll be discussing equal opportunity notification requirements. USDA's notification requirements for recipients of federal financial assistance, such as NIFA grantees, are that they will post the non-discrimination statement in its entirety, containing those protected bases mandated in applicable federal law. And I have those protected bases listed in parentheses here on the slide. The full non-discrimination statement must be included on all print and non-print materials, including websites, brochures, newsletters, and audio and video materials. I have here on this slide the full non-discrimination statement for federally financially assisted programs. There are several different versions of this statement if you look online, and one of the ways that you can tell that you are using the correct version of the non-discrimination statement is if you look at the first sentence. It only has listed those protected bases that I had listed on the previous slide. Other versions of this statement that are used by conducted programs and USDA have additional protected characteristics. So they have these, and then they also have things like religion or political affiliation. So you can know that you're using the right one if it just has these protected characteristics. You'll also note that the first line of this version of the statement says, "This institution is prohibited from discriminating." It does not say USDA is prohibited from discriminating. So that's another clue that you're using the right version of the statement because your institution is not the U.S. Department of Agriculture. USDA's requirements do allow you to use this one sentence that I have here in quotes on this slide, "This institution is an equal opportunity provider," in lieu of the full statement if the size of your material is too small to include that full statement that I showed on the previous slide. If you do use this sentence, it needs to be in the same size as the text of your material. So this would be something that you would utilize, for example, if you had like a one-page event announcement or a fact sheet or something that was just one page, you wouldn't have room to put that full statement on it, so you would just utilize this one sentence. And the second item is something that has been covered in other webinars that are a part of this training series. And that is that recipients, in addition to the non-discrimination statement, recipients are required to notify individuals with disabilities and individuals with limited English proficiency, that's what LEP stands for, of their right to free accommodations and language assistance. And recipients are also required to provide free accommodations and language assistance when they're requested. And this is an example of a reasonable accommodation and language access notice. You can modify this if, for example, you're using it on something that's not for an event for a specific date, but just about your programs in general or a series of things. You would want to maybe adjust the first sentence to say, "If you need a reasonable accommodation, please contact," etc., etc. Or, "This institution provides reasonable accommodations to individuals with disabilities. If you need an accommodation, please contact," etc., etc. So you can modify this as appropriate. The important part is just that you're making people aware that reasonable accommodation and language access is available in simple, plain language terms, and also that you're providing specific contact information in terms of an email address and a telephone number so that people can contact, they know who to contact if they need to contact someone about language access or a reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodation notices should be placed on public-facing documents and any communications that announce events or activities. Another best practice, if you have a physical space like an office or a reception area that happens to see a lot of traffic from limited English proficient individuals, posting that language access notice, up in a visible place in that physical space is a really good practice. And if you have a secondary language in your service area that is dominant, or predominant, actually posting that language access statement in that secondary language, right? Because a limited English proficient individual might have trouble with English, so posting it in English might not be as helpful to them as posting it in that secondary language. And that's just a best practice depending on what your service population is like. Another thing I wanted to briefly mention are Babel notices, and you'll see an example of a Babel notice here that is just a statement in the most frequently encountered languages that says that the document is important and that it needs to be translated immediately. This is something that you would want to use on any content that is legally binding or that would result in serious consequences for the reader if the reader doesn't understand it. Off the top of my head, I cannot think of any documents used in an extension program or a research program that's funded by NIFA or another NIFA, grantee program that would have documents that fall in this category, but I certainly don't know every single document that you might use. So this may be something that you come into contact with. At the very least, if you are co-located with other USDA agencies that provide food assistance benefits, often they would have documents that would be legally binding where people are stating their income in order to qualify for benefits or something like that, or if it's a notice about receiving food benefits, that obviously if someone didn't understand the notice, it would result in the serious consequence of them not receiving that food benefit. So it's something that you may encounter with an agency or someone that you're collaborating with or co-located with, and just to be aware of this, I think is important. The and justice for all posters, according to the USDA notification regulation, are required to be displayed prominently in all offices where there is a USDA presence and where it may be read by customers. There is a specific size requirement for posters and a specific text size because we want that to be readable. So what that means is that if you need posters, you need to reach out to us and request them, and we will have some sent to you free of charge. You can't just print them off on a 8.5 by 11, from your computer and tape it to your office while you need to get the posters from us. And I do have a contact information on the last slide of this presentation for you if you need to do that. Also be aware they are available in languages other than English. So again, if you have a high LEP population and you want to get it in an additional language, those are available and we can send those to you. If you're doing a virtual event, you can just use the non-discrimination statement. It is the same information that is on the posters. And you are required to remember to put that non-discrimination statement on all of your materials so that fulfills the same notification requirement either way. And I have here a link, and that, if you want to click on the PDF of the slides on our website, you can access it that way, or copy and paste the long address. You can do that. You can also search with this departmental regulation number and date and find it pretty easily. But this is the source for everything that we've discussed today with regard to public notification requirements if you want to review it as well. Moving forward to public outreach activities, and again, today is a civil rights related training, so we are looking briefly from the civil rights lens. Obviously, there are a lot of different aspects to public outreach, and there are a lot of different reasons and ways of doing it that are outside the scope of civil rights for other reasons that you might want to do public outreach and methods behind doing it. But today we're going to look at it from the civil rights perspective. And talking about outreach, we're talking about those advertising, marketing, communication, or collaborative activities that are intended to raise awareness of, recruit new participants to, or generally publicize agricultural research, education, or extension program activities. So here we're making the distinction between an outreach activity and a program activity, and defining them based on the intention or the purpose of the activity. Is it to provide some educational benefit? Then we're talking about a program activity. Is the purpose more just to raise awareness of your activities or, you know, recruit new participants to those program activities? Then it's probably an outreach activity. From a civil rights perspective, outreach activities are really important because they help ensure that everyone in your eligible service population has an equal opportunity to benefit from federally funded programs. And for that to happen, we need to think about whether or not our general outreach efforts are effective in reaching everyone in the eligible service population, and if any targeted outreach efforts are being done to underrepresented groups and or historically underserved populations. So two different approaches and different ways that we evaluate those approaches. With regard to general outreach, this is exactly what it sounds like. You're not looking to reach any specific group. You are just looking to provide information, marketing, or advertising about what you're doing to the whole population of your state or your county if it's a more local outreach effort. And two things, major things with regard to general outreach is we want to make sure that we're utilizing a variety of methods. And I've listed here all of the different ways that we can conduct outreach. I think obviously we all have limited resources to invest in outreach, so it's not that we're expecting you to do all of these things all the time, but just that you're mixing it up. So you're not, every time you do an outreach activity, you're not only doing it through direct or postal mailing, or you're not only using social media to do your general outreach, but that you're utilizing a variety of different methods when you do outreach. So sometimes you're doing mailing, sometimes you're doing emailing, sometimes you are doing radio advertising or print advertising in, mainstream publications or special interest publications that reach a specific audience. Distributing flyers at an event is a great outreach activity. You can also leave them with a community or a partnering organization so that they can distribute it or have them set out in their reception area for people to grab. Obviously, emailing, social media posts, web advertising, and you can also collaborate with community organizations. A lot of people don't realize that this is a form of outreach, but it's very important. Collaborating with community groups, special interest groups, advocacy organizations, going in and speaking for 5 minutes at an event that they're having or a class that they're having, or even just meeting with some folks who work for the community organizations or those partnering organizations and sharing your materials with them. The other major thing when it comes to general outreach is you do want to assess your reach. So consider these kind of traditional ways of assessing reach, such as page views and followers and likes on social media, circulation numbers for print publications. You can also get perspective from your partners, stakeholders, those local organizations and community groups. You can do research into what the likely audience is from your different forms of outreach. and you can kind of draw conclusions about who you're reaching based on that. I recently read something that said radio advertising on a weekly basis is effective in coming into contact with 97% of the Hispanic population that is 18 years or older in the United States. So different forms of outreach are going to reach different groups of people. And there's a lot of research done by marketing folks into this that you can access pretty easily if you want to get more information about your likely audiences. You can get feedback from the participants in your program, obviously, about how they, found out about your program, as well as from your frontline staff who are plugged into the community. They can maybe tell you about how your outreach is working. Moving on to targeted outreach, this is again exactly what it sounds like. It is when we specifically do outreach activities with the intention of reaching certain groups that are underrepresented. Maybe in our participant data, we see that they're underrepresented, or maybe just a group that's historically been underserved. And targeted outreach efforts can be a part of a corrective action plan for a parity issue and a parity analysis, where you do a barrier analysis and look at a parity problem with underrepresentation in your participant numbers. Targeted outreach can be something that comes out of that as a way to remedy underrepresentations, but it's also something that you can just do because you recognize, populations or groups that have historically been underserved, and you want to do some targeted outreach as well, along with your general outreach. A couple of key points, and a lot of this involves just things to think about and research and consider as you do your outreach. The first one is you want to know your audience. So things like the socioeconomic factors, cultural norms, religious values can all affect the way that you do your outreach. Language needs, if you're trying to do outreach to a population with limited English proficiency, doing it in English probably isn't going to get you very far, right? If you are doing outreach to, for example, a refugee community that has a high population in your county, and these are refugees from a country maybe with very low educational opportunities, and they have very low educational background because of their refugee status and where they've immigrated from. Maybe there are literacy issues, and so maybe reaching out to them, via a print vehicle, newspaper, something like that, is not going to be as effective as reaching out to them via radio or something like that. Same thing with the preferred methods of communicating. If they have a preferred method of communicating in a specific community or a specific group, and you're aware of that, obviously you can cater how you're trying to communicate with them to meet that. The perception of your organization or activity, experiences with discrimination and marginalization, all important things to know about your audience. You also want to develop effective messaging, and you can do this by considering these main points. Are you using inclusive language? What pronouns are you using? What gendered terms are you using? What words and terms related to disabilities are you using? And what words and terms related to race and ethnicity are you using? Some research here can really help in terms of referring to specific communities and specific individuals in the way that they wish to be referred to. It's important to represent diversity, which is being authentically inclusive without tokenizing individuals, and paying attention to how you are portraying different individuals. Don't make assumptions or stereotype. Avoid generalizing about groups or communities, And examine your implicit biases. So, you know, what biases do you bring to the table that you can watch out for when you are developing that messaging? Lastly, in regard to this idea of targeted outreach efforts, it's important to create community connection. You can do this by earning trust through partnerships with community groups and organizations. You can do this by incorporating community feedback into all stages of your program planning and implementation. So not just at the end stage after you've already done a program, seeing what people thought of it, but utilizing community feedback when you're planning programs, when you're defining needs and designing solutions to meet those needs with your programs, incorporating that community feedback into all stages of that process. And improving community engagement with your organization. What is your transparency like? What is your cultural literacy like? And how can you develop cultural literacy for the communities and populations that you're working with, and have good communication? How easy is it to reach people at your organization? What is that communication like? And when we talk about outreach activities, whether they be general or targeted outreach activities, the stuff that you want to document for an outreach activity, again, we're making the distinction here between an outreach activity and a program activity. But the things that you want to document are the date, the nature, and the location of the activity, who conducted the activity, your target audience, and your impact, which is the approximate number of individuals reached. So it's not the same as saying we had this many participants exactly, this is their reg data. You're saying who were you intending to reach with this outreach activity? Was it everyone in a county, everyone in a state, or was it individuals of a specific community that you're trying to reach out to? And the impact, that is, you know, how many people were at the event that you attended? How many flyers did you hand out? What is the circulation number of the print media that you put an advertisement in? So it's a different approach, but these are things you want to document that you're doing when you're doing outreach activities. Finally, my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have technical assistance questions related to civil rights compliance. I also have the contact for my colleague Lydia if you want to join our civil rights listserv, or if you want to request some of those And Justice for All posters be mailed to you. Lydia is the person to contact. Finally, all of our webinars such as this are available on our website, and you can open them by using the password equal opportunity, one word with a capital E and a capital O. So check those other webinars out. There are several very useful ones in this series. And thank you so much for joining and viewing this webinar. I hope you found it useful. Thank you.